Chapter 13:21 Execution Grounds. Luo Dan stood in the middle of the square, carefully holding up the knife in his hand, and chanted for the victim according to the ritual. The sky burial ceremony is a reincarnation process prepared for the dead. But today, this sky burial is for the living. According to the requirements of the four chieftains, these rebels will not be killed with a single knife. Instead, they must watch their flesh and blood being shaved off, then put into the pot for cooking, and then shared with the believers. This is an extremely cruel punishment, not only physical pain, but also psychological humiliation. The banner of the rebels is to overthrow the chieftain nobles and liberate the serfs. But when they died, countless serfs cheered for them and scrambled for their flesh and blood. How ironic is this? Deji sat on the chair, his eyes swept around fiercely, and then he said to his monks, "Be alert, the rebels may take action soon." The monk nodded. "Don't worry, Chiba, as long as they dare to show up, we will strangle them to death in the first place." Deji nodded with satisfaction. "I'm afraid they won't come." At this time, Luodan in front of the sky burial platform had raised the knife in his hand. A rebel was tied up, stripped of his clothes, and then tied to the sky burial platform. Luodan looked down at him coldly, and there was only indignation and mockery in the man's eyes, without any fear. Luodan said, "Let me send you on the road to reincarnation." He raised the bright long knife in his hand and was about to fall on the chest of the rebel. At this time, among the kneeling crowd, a pair of eyes suddenly became sharp. Boom! 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 Suddenly, there was a violent explosion around the square. The earth shook for a moment, and the believers who were kneeling on the ground wailed and fell to the ground. The explosion came too suddenly. It was obvious that someone had buried explosives around the square in advance. The whole square was in chaos. Deiji's face suddenly turned cold. He knew that this was the work of the undercovers planted by the rebels among them, and the identity of those who were able to place explosives around the square must be high. He did not panic, but stood up immediately and gave orders. "Guard the square. Anyone who approaches will be killed without mercy." There were tens of thousands of believers outside the square. At this time, many people were scared by the sudden explosion and ran around. Some people subconsciously rushed to the square. As soon as Deji gave the order, the monks of Songjia Temple and the private soldiers of Yashalangtai immediately took up their weapons and blocked all those who were approaching. The crowd was surging. Although these soldiers were shouting loudly to let everyone stay away, the people who were swept in could not control their bodies at all. Da-da-da-da. The soldiers didn't care about that. They only knew to obey their orders and immediately shot and killed all the believers who approached. The believers in the front rows fell down like wheat being cut. Among these people, dozens of figures suddenly rushed out quickly, and the weapons in their hands counterattacked the monks and private soldiers. The rebels hidden in them finally took action. Luodan, who was performing the sky burial ceremony, just raised his eyelids, then lowered his head, and his thick wrist did not shake at all, and directly pierced the chest of the rebel. Blood beads overflowed, and then a straight red line appeared on his chest. All the processes avoided blood vessels, so the blood line was extremely thin, like art. The rebels did not feel pain, because they were already numb from the cold. He used the last bit of strength to shout at his comrades who came to rescue him. "Go, go. Don't worry about us." Everyone knew that this was a trap deliberately aimed at them, but they still came without hesitation. Chuanzhou Dharma Assembly. This is the most grand event in the hearts of all tantric believers. If they were timid at this time, and didn't even dare to save their own comrades, they would completely lose the support of the people in the southwest region. So today, even if they failed, they had to let everyone see that they dared to declare war on power and injustice. When the rebels rushed over, Zhang Yi and others were still watching coldly. Paji Gaseng sat upright on the chair, not panicking at all. Zhang Yi and others were just watching the fun. He promised the Snow Mountain Condor that he would not take action against them at that time, and would only help when the opportunity was right. But at the moment, the impact of the rebels was obviously blocked by the monks of Songjia Temple and the private soldiers of the Yashalangtai family. They were too weak. At this time, the people of the other three families did not do anything, and they were already fighting very hard. There were shouts and shouts around the square, and the people on both sides had already fought together. On the sky burial platform in the center of the square, other sky burial masters were at a loss, not knowing whether to leave or stay. Only Luodan was still dividing meticulously. He seemed to draw a chessboard on the body of the rebel fighter, crisscrossing, and soon his flesh was cut into square pieces. Then, he casually threw the pieces of meat into a large pot of boiling water next to him. Seeing his comrades die in battle, the others who were tied up, the rebels tied to the execution rack had a face full of grief, and they swept their vicious eyes towards every noble lord sitting at the scene. But now they could do nothing. Each of them had been hungry for 3 to 5 days. Even for the aliens, if they did not replenish their energy through eating for a long time, it would be difficult for them to even walk, let alone fight. What's more, they were all wearing chains weighing hundreds of kilograms. Outside the square, the rebels were still fighting hard. A woof! In the distance, the sound of wolf howling appeared, followed by the howling of wild wolves one after another. Zhang Yi looked in the direction of the sound and saw a group of gray wild wolves rushing over on the distant snowfield, bringing up snowflakes all over the sky. On one of the huge wolves, Zhuoma waved a long whip in his hand and rushed over with murderous intent. That guy should have taken action, right? Otherwise, these people alone can't save the captives here. Zhang Yi thought so in his heart. Sure enough, the next moment, an eagle's cry came from the land behind the wolf pack. Golden light rose from the horizon, like a big sun. Then, a golden figure quickly flew towards the sky burial platform. It was a strange man with golden wings. He wore a mask on his face, so his appearance could not be seen clearly, but his powerful aura quickly crossed the entire snowfield and impacted the army formation of the monks and private soldiers. The wind blew up, and no matter how strong these strange men were, they could not stop the slight gust of wind. The originally indestructible formation immediately loosened. The surrounding rebels found an opportunity and rushed to the square with a roar. Chapter 1322 Ling Qi. The square in front of Songjia Temple was very large, and the execution platform for the sky burial ceremony was still very far away from Zhang Yi and others. Moreover, even if the rebels rushed over, they were not afraid. Zhang Yi still looked like he was watching a show, but his attention was on the golden-winged alien flying in the air. Snow Mountain Divine Eagle. Zhang Yi whispered. The appearance of the Snow Mountain Divine Eagle made the expressions of the people present suddenly solemn. At this time, the funeral master who had been sitting on the altar finally stood up. Alas! Everyone heard a sigh. The funeral master looked at the person in the sky, and there seemed to be 2 powerful wills colliding with each other in the air. That was not a supernatural power, but the powerful pressure brought by the 2 Epsilon-level aliens, which made most people present pale. Zhang Yi pretended to be timid and took a half step back, while searching the crowd. Sure enough, next to Luminoju, he saw a tall figure who was more than 1.9 meters tall. The man stood upright with his arms folded. Even when facing 2 Epsilons, he was still not afraid at all. Instead, there was a hint of excitement in his eyes. The Snow Mountain Condor spread his huge golden wings. In an instant, golden rays of light were like sharp blades, attacking the entire square indiscriminately. The people of the 4 major families, including the monks of Songjia Temple, were all covered by the golden blades without exception. Stop! The funeral master spoke slowly. Facing the fierce attack of the Snow Mountain Condor, he just waved his hand lightly. Suddenly, the millions of terrifying golden blades seemed to hit an invisible wall and were isolated outside the entire square. Juegua, if you don't want too many people to die here, follow me, the Snow Mountain Condor said, and then flapped its wings and flew away. The funeral master did not hesitate and decisively jumped up. He turned into a golden light. Although he could not fly, he gently stepped on the bodies of believers and chased the Snow Mountain Condor. He had to accept the battle, otherwise, he would not be able to protect everyone present. As they left, Zhang Yi raised a smile. Isn't this just creating an opportunity for me? The burial master was not here, and no one in Songjia Temple could stop him from doing anything now. However, Zhang Yi would not do anything openly. After all, there were 2 Epsilon-level aliens hiding in secret. Zhang Yi looked at the sky burial platform from a distance. The surrounding battle quickly became white-hot. The rebels didn't know how many explosives they had buried around the square, and there were too many people on the scene, which was a mess, and the surrounding monks and private soldiers could not provide support. For a while, they really rushed to the vicinity of the sky burial platform. The surrounding sky burial masters were already scared and at a loss, but Luodan seemed to be fine, and he was still slowly cutting the rebel's body. But after a few minutes, the rebel's body had been cut by his superb knife skills. Until the end, Luodan reached out and picked up a handful of salt from the plate next to him, rubbed his fingers, and sprinkled it on the body that was almost only a skeleton and internal organs. Stimulated, the eyeballs of the terrifying body rolled twice. Luodan nodded with satisfaction, and then swung the knife to end his life. Then he stood up slowly, walked to the big pot next to him, and began to slowly stir the meat in the pot. Zhang Yi looked at this scene and couldn't help but say in his heart, "This cook is really a ruthless person." At this time, Liang Yu behind him touched Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi understood that Liang Yu was asking him whether he wanted to take action. Zhang Yi smiled faintly, and the light in his right eye was slowly distorted. The next moment, the chains on the rebels tied to the execution rack, which were as thick as their arms, all broke at the same time. They fell to the ground from the high execution rack and struggled to get up. Everyone watched their companions being disintegrated, and the terrifying eyes in their eyes seemed to want to eat people. Their bodies were too weak, and they had been injected with drugs, so they could not exert any superpowers at this time. But they still struggled to rush over and fight with the soldiers on the sky burial platform. Drugs can suppress superpowers, but there is a kind of superhuman with extremely strong drug resistance, that is, the superhuman of the strengthening system. Because their ability is to strengthen their own bodies, this is a permanent mutation. Many of the resistant soldiers on the sky burial platform lost the restraints of chains and immediately used the thick chains as weapons and began to cooperate with the comrades who rescued them and fought with the private soldiers and monks.
Boom. Boom. Boom.
The explosions around the square created huge chaos, and the escape of the prisoners made Deiji's face look ugly. He stood up from his chair and shouted to the chieftains of the 3 families, including Paji, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and send your people to support us." Paji Gasang said anxiously, "Chiba, our people are left outside. We only brought a few guards with us to protect our own safety. We can't spare any more people." There were more than a dozen strange people around him, all of whom were the most brave and powerful. Not to mention that Zhang Yi and his men were also there, and they could definitely guarantee his safety. But now, facing the impact of the rebels, he didn't dare to take risks. Even the Snow Mountain Eagle appeared. If he was not careful, he would be short of people around him. What if he died? This is the territory of Songjia Temple, so let Deiji's people fight the rebels and consume their manpower. Luminoju and Xiaxia Jiatsua also expressed the same attitude and refused to mobilize the guards around them to support. Although there were also a large number of troops stationed outside, no one expected that the chaos would appear inside. If there had not been a big explosion in the venue, the manpower they left here would be enough to deal with everything. And with the panic of tens of thousands of believers, the troops outside could not rush in to fight the enemy. What's more, Zhuoma drove the wolves in the snowy area to attack them, and they had to send people to resist. The 4 major families here were holding each other back, and no one was willing to send their personal guards to fight the enemy. There was time for the rebels to rush to the vicinity of the sky burial platform. Seeing that the sky burial ceremony could not continue, Luodan no longer hesitated, packed up the props and hung them on his waist, then turned around and left. When the rebels saw Luodan, the hatred in their eyes was extremely strong. As the chief sky burial master, countless rebel comrades died at Luodan's hands, including leaders. Luodan was most notorious for using human materials to cook delicacies, thus cultivating the habit of cannibalism in the upper class of the snow region. What the superiors like, the subordinates will also like even more. This phenomenon has spread from top to bottom, and countless people have become food for others. In the rebels' must-kill list, Luo Dan ranked 5th, second only to the chieftains of the 4 major families. Chapter 1323 Human Chef. A tall and thin rebel was an orc-type ability user. After he transformed, he became a snow-white ancient ape that was more than 3 meters tall and had arms that were longer than his knees. He could reach hundreds of meters high with a single leap, easily passed the defense, and came to the sky burial platform. Looking at the demon who left calmly, the abominable guy nicknamed Human Chef, the ancient ape ejected sharp claws with both hands, rushed to Luodon's back like a whirlwind, and chopped down with one claw. Luodon's calm eyes flashed with a cold look. He had already pulled out a sharp knife with his right hand, and quickly turned around and chopped back. He dodged the claws of the giant ape and quickly walked towards his body as if throwing himself into his arms. In a flash, he had already gone around the giant ape's armpits and behind the giant ape. The white knife light wove into a dense net in the air, covering the giant ape's body. The next moment, his huge body turned into thousands of pieces of broken meat, which were scattered all over the ground. The chef cuts up an ox with his divine knife. I have cut up thousands of people in my life, and I can see the structure of the human body clearly with my eyes closed. I know best where it is easiest to cut, Luo Dan said lightly. Don't underestimate the chef. We also use knives to make a living. This is one of his abilities. The chef cuts up an ox, which can find the most vulnerable part of the opponent's body, and then cut it apart. The ancient ape alien thought he was a chef with no fighting power and paid the price with his life. After killing one person, Luo Dan did not continue to participate in the battle, but turned away. He is a chef, and he has no interest in killing people other than cooking. The rebels here can do nothing but watch the chef walk away. The bullets in the air are intertwined like a big net, and some people even carry rocket launchers, which are still powerful against low-level aliens. The rebels rushed to their captured comrades and tried to take them away. But now they can only take advantage of the chaos between the 4 major families and the private soldiers of Songjia Temple to get close. Once the time is delayed for too long, the enemy will be ready, and they will surely die. And it is many times more difficult to take away more than 20 friendly soldiers who are almost unable to move. A disheveled rebel said to his comrades who came to rescue him, "Don't worry about us. Bring Bam back. She is more important than us." Bam, the second in command of the rebels, is also the main reason for the rebels to attack the Chuanjiao Fahui. Time is urgent, and everyone knows that this is not the time for sentimental love. Take care on the way. Without too many words, they handed weapons to their comrades who had lost their ability to move, and then went to rescue Bam. And those rebels who chose to give up their lives showed no fear on their faces. Death is not necessarily a pain for this horrible world after the end of the world, but a relief. Some of them chose to drag an enemy into the water, and some who couldn't move at all, so they killed themselves. It's better to die like this than to be buried alive in the sky. On Bam's side, several stronger aliens in the rebels have come to her side. One of the girls with thick, long braids walked up to her, rolled up her sleeves, and held out her snow-white arm. "Sister Bam, come on." Bam glanced at her and bit her without hesitation. Blood immediately spurted out. Bam sucked the girl's blood, and slowly, the color on her face gradually improved. The girl's face turned a little pale. "Bam, stop sucking, that's enough." The girl continued to raise her arm relentlessly. "More. Your strength has not fully recovered. In order to save you, I have been preparing for a long time before I came. No, it's enough. If you suck any more, you will die," Bam said, while scanning the surroundings with a cold gaze, and finally looked at the Senga Temple Triba on the high platform in the distance, looking down at them with an angry face. Yashalengtai Deji.
Bam.
Pushed her arm away regardless of the girl's opinion. "Jiuegwa is not here, and the current Songjia Temple can't stop me." Bam is a powerful alien with an ability index of 9,800 points. Looking at the entire snowy plateau, he is one of the top 10 strong men in terms of strength. If it were in the past, She would not dare to be so arrogant. But now, after the internal friction between the four major families and Songjia Temple, their top aliens have died in large numbers. Now looking at Songjia Temple, several of the most powerful Dharma protectors have died at the hands of Zhang Yi and Liang Yu, and few people can stop Bam. Deiji's face was gloomy and ugly. Although he was hurt by the death of several Dharma protectors under his command, he didn't take it too seriously before. There is no shortage of geniuses in the Snowy Plateau. Delta-level masters can always be recreated through resource accumulation and drug catalysis. With the funeral master sitting in Songjia Temple, he is not afraid of anything. However, this has also led to the current embarrassing situation. But the other three major families have no intention of taking action, which makes Deiji's face gloomy and terrible. Gaseng, let the guests around you take action. Deiji looked at Paji Gaseng. Paji Gaseng sighed. Chiba, these are the people I hired to protect my safety. If you want them to do something, it will be a different price. Deiji's eyes widened with anger. While the two were still arguing, Bam raised her hands, and a white cold air began to emerge from her arms. At the same time, the air around her was still slowly rotating, from slow to fast, forming a terrifying cold current around her body. The ice and snow aliens have a unique advantage in the Ice Age, because nature is their home ground everywhere. Bam pressed his arms on the ground, and the raging snowstorm quickly invaded the surroundings with him and several rebels as the center.
Boom. Boom. Boom.
Boom.
Boom.
A series of solid ice burst out from the ground, forming a group of huge ice lotuses, beautiful and dazzling, but also extremely sharp, quickly piercing the bodies of more than a dozen private soldiers and monks around. These ice flowers are everywhere, from the ground, from the pillars, and can even condense directly in the air, killing and injuring many enemies. The powerful cold current turned into a raging storm, engulfing the snowflakes on the ground, and for a time, the entire venue was in chaos. Let's go, Bam said to several companions. She led everyone and fled out of the venue without looking back. Even now, the three major families still did not plan to send people to hunt down. The Paji family and Deiji were alienated, so naturally they were unwilling to contribute. The Ramin family and the Shaza family were angry because they helped Deiji attack the Paji family last time, and in the end they made great efforts, lost their capable men, and did not get any benefits. Chapter 13:24 Victory. Deiji was angry and anxious at this time. It was really a pity that there were not enough people when they were needed. At this time, he had no one to use. Facing Bam and others who fled far away, he could not chase them. He had to immediately order the private soldiers around to stop them. There were tens of thousands of private soldiers of the Yashalangtai family and thousands of monks of Songjia Temple outside. This force should not be underestimated. Although Bam's strength is strong, after all, she is weak at this time and cannot be compared with the past. Using the human wave tactics, there is a chance to keep her. The process of the rebels breaking through was not easy. Deiji issued a death order, asking people to keep everyone here at all costs. So those soldiers completely ignored the large number of believers around them and used heavy weapons to bombard the direction of the rebels. Seeing this, Liang Yu touched Zhang Yi and sent him a message using the communication equipment. I want to help them leave. If Bam fails to escape, then all their efforts will be in vain, right? Zhang Yi nodded, and then ordered Mu Yan to take Liang Yu to help. When they came, most of their people were hiding in Mu Yan's shadow space, so others didn't know how many people he brought. Everyone was wearing the same style of combat uniforms, so even if Liang Yu left, no one would notice this place for a while. Immediately, Liang Yu cooperated with Mu Yan and quietly left while everyone was paying attention to the chaos around them. The storm caused by Bam soon subsided, and the square was already in a mess. Most of the rebels were not taken away, but they had committed suicide or dragged others into the water. In order to save Bam, many rebels who came to rescue died here. There was chaos all around, and the fierce storm surged towards the southwest, where the sound of gunfire continued, and the aliens of the Yashalangtai family and Songjia Temple were also trying their best to block Bam. Zhuama led the wolf pack to harass, and when she saw Sister Bam, who looked haggard but still had sharp eyes like a hawk, tears welled up in her eyes. "Sister Bam, are you okay?" The two finally met, but there was no time to reminisce. Bam said, "Leave here quickly, don't delay." She was very surprised in her heart. She didn't expect this operation to be so easy. But when she thought of the reaction of the four major families in the stands, she couldn't help but realize something in her heart. They're also biting each other, hee, this is a good thing. The internal struggles of the four major families have become more and more intense with the arrival of the Chuanzhao Dharma Assembly. In the past 2 years, if they hadn't fought so hard, where would the resistance army have survived? In addition, the three families' siege of the Pudge family a while ago caused the three parties to lose a lot of combat power, especially the top aliens. The more they fight, the closer we are to liberating the entire southwest region. Hua la la. The sound of the chain rang in her ears. A skinny monk walked out of the snow fog in the distance, holding a black chain, looking at the rebels with a faint look. In another direction, a 6-meter-tall alien who looked like a jackal, tiger, or leopard bared his fangs and showed his murderous intentions. From the misty snow fog, one alien after another walked out. Their aura was strong, and there were 6 aliens with more than 9,000 points. Although the strongest alien was only 9,500 points, it was still an extremely difficult opponent for Bam at this time. Not to mention that there were dozens of aliens below the captain level who also gathered around. "Prepare for battle. Rush out," Bam shouted in a deep voice. She knew it would not be so easy to escape. The background of Songjia Temple and the Yashalangtai family was not a joke. At this time, an abrupt voice sounded beside them. "I will help you leave." Bam's eyes condensed and looked to the side cautiously. However, Zhuama was overjoyed when she heard this voice. "Are you here, Miss E?" When she saw that the chains of Bam and others were cut off for no reason, Zhuama knew that it was Zhang Yi and Liang Yu who took action. At this time, the kind woman came to help them again. "Make a snowstorm with all your strength to interfere with their sight, and I can take you away." Liang Yu's voice sounded again. Bam didn't understand the situation, so Zhuama told her briefly, "She's a helper. You can trust her." Bam no longer hesitated and quickly used all her strength to activate her ability. She opened the 5 fingers of her right hand, slowly rotated them in the air, and then clenched them hard. The air in front of her eyes seemed to be pulled by something, and it rotated rapidly, and then it roared violently. The cold wind rolled up the ice and snow on the ground and rushed into the sky. The area of several kilometers was covered with snow and fog, and the surrounding scenery could not be seen clearly. At this time, not far from Bam's feet, a round black shadow appeared. Liang Yu showed half of her body covered with silver-gray armor. "Come here." Zhuama was not the first time to see Mu Yan's ability, and immediately took everyone into her shadow space. Then Mu Yan controlled the shadow and rushed towards the southwest along the ground in the blizzard. The blizzard lasted for a long time before it ended. The aliens stayed around tightly. As long as they waited until the wind and snow ended, the resistance. The army could not hide their tracks. Moreover, they were surrounded by their people, and they had surrounded the area in 3 layers. It was impossible for them to escape quietly. Then when the blizzard was over, everyone was dumbfounded. The dozens of rebels really disappeared under their noses. You know, although Mu Yan's ability was not very good in combat, he was very good at hiding his whereabouts. Shadow is a 2-dimensional means, and it will not cause fluctuations in space when it moves. Even Zhang Yi, who was at the Ypsilon level at the time, did not notice Mu Yan hiding around him for many days, let alone them. On the square side, the riot ended quickly. Although there were many corpses left at the scene, they were quickly cleaned up under the command of the monks. Deji received the order from Bam and others to escape, and his pupils shrank in anger. The pupils as small as green beans emitted a cannibalistic light. He gritted his teeth and glared at the chieftains of the other 3 families. Those people looked at him with their eyes and noses and didn't care about his attitude. In fact, They were almost laughing to death in their hearts. This operation was led by Songjia Monastery. After this incident, the one who suffered the most loss of face was Daiji, not them. So they were happy to see Daiji suffer a setback. Daiji took a deep breath and whispered a few words to his subordinates next to him, who immediately obeyed the order. Soon after, dozens of bloody corpses were carried to the sky burial platform. A lama pointed at the corpses and shouted to the believers, "Those demons who intended to fight against Tantric Buddhism have been executed." From such a distance, the believers didn't know whether it was true or not, but since the lamas of Songjia Monastery said so, it must be true. Even if they had doubts in their hearts, they didn't dare to say it at this time. It wasn't them who died, whether it was the rebels or other innocent people who died, it had nothing to do with them, they just came to watch the excitement. So soon, there was a cheering sound at the scene. Chapter 13:25 I'm hungry. The square seemed chaotic, but in fact, the rebels did not even rush to the stands where the high-level officials were. They also knew that they were no match for the Tusi and Songjia Temple in a real fight, so they just took advantage of the absence of the funeral master to quickly rescue people and leave. Zhang Yi looked at the rebels who were leaving and smiled without saying a word. However, he was thinking about what happened to the Snow Mountain Eagle who led the funeral master away. That night, Zhang Yi felt the strength of the funeral master clearly. He was able to fight against the three of them at the same time, but he was just slightly inferior. Although there was no life-and-death fight, his strength was definitely above the Black Chariot level of more than 20,000 points. The strength of the Snow Mountain Eagle was only 13,000 at most. With such a huge gap in strength, even if he was not killed instantly, he would definitely die once the funeral master had the killing intention. How dare he? Zhang Yi was very curious. However, the person who could organize the rebels must not be a fool. He must have his own way to escape. After a while, the funeral master turned into a golden light and came back. His body was spotless and still as majestic as ever. Daiji was so angry at this time. When he saw the funeral master coming back, he hurried to ask, "Father, did you kill the evil eagles?" There was anger in his eyes. This time, the Chuan Zhao Fahui was attacked by others, which made him lose face. In addition to the real failure with the Paji family a while ago, he urgently needed something to show his majesty at this moment. There is no doubt that if the funeral master killed the Snow Mountain Eagle, then the escape of several rebels would not be a big deal. The funeral master chanted a Buddhist name, Amitabha. When will the revenge end? Killing is not a way to solve problems, but the root cause of creating disasters. Chiba, don't kill rashly. As soon as these words came out, everyone present immediately understood that the funeral master did not kill the Snow Mountain Eagle. A strange light flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. Is this funeral master really compassionate enough to not kill? Otherwise, he couldn't think of how the Snow Mountain Eagle could survive under his hands. Chiba was so angry that he was speechless and pointed at him regardless of his image. You, with your strength, it's easy to kill the rebel. If you leave him alone, I don't know how many people will die because of him. Why can't you figure it out? The funeral master smiled slightly. The Buddha taught the world to use love to influence. Even if it is a bad person, he can put down his butcher knife and become a Buddha on the spot. My ambition is to teach the world and let everyone learn to put down their weapons. Daiji threw his sleeves in grief and anger. The funeral master learned Buddhism at the age of 8 and has been with the ancient Buddha for more than 10 years. This makes his heart pure and he is the best Buddhist, but such a person is unlikely to become a sharp knife in his hand. Forget it. Let's finish the Chuanzhao Dharma assembly first. So many believers are watching. Daiji had to hold back his temper. If they made a fuss here, it would only shake their image in the minds of believers. So the funeral master returned to the Dharma platform and sat upright. His eyes looked into the sky in the distance, as if there was an unruly eagle flying and circling there. Amitabha Luajwa, I hope that one day you will understand my painstaking efforts. Killing is not a means to bring peace. Daiji stepped forward and declared in the name of the Sangha Temple Tribe that the evil Snow Mountain Demon Eagle had been subdued by the master of the funeral. However, The master of the funeral wanted to follow the example of the ancestors in subduing the golden-winged Dupeng and gave the Snow Mountain demon eagle a chance to reform, wanting him to sincerely repent. After hearing this, the believers chose to believe it. After all, the rebels would not kill civilians on weekdays, but were only enemies of the 4 Tusi families, so from the bottom of their hearts, they did not hate the rebels that much. The ceremony continues. Deji called the Sky Burial Masters and said with red eyes, "Perform the Sky Burial ceremony on the bodies of these rebel villains." Paji Luodan nodded slightly and walked over with his knife. The ground was full of corpses, some of which were from the rebels, and some were from the Tusi family's private soldiers and monks. Some people came to clean up the bodies, but because the battle was too fierce, a large amount of explosives were buried around the square, and the bodies were basically all unrecognizable at this time, not complete enough. There was no other way, so they could not care about it, so they gathered them all up. Luo Dan and the Sky Burial Masters worked together to put the bodies on the Sky Burial platform, and after a solemn prayer, they began to hold the Sky Burial. It was cold, and the bodies had already lost their temperature, and were hard. There was no blood after cutting them, only pieces of frozen white meat. Luo Dan put a piece of meat in his palm and held it up to the sky. Buddha's messenger. Bring the souls of the dead to heaven. Luo Dan and the Sky Burial Masters prayed loudly. However, there were no eagles in the sky, so they just went through such a ceremony and threw the pieces of meat into the boiling pot next to them. The ceremony was carried out slowly. Luo Dan was using the knife and cooking skillfully. Soon, an extremely rich fragrance accompanied by steaming hot air drifted around the entire square. Zhang Yi was very familiar with this fragrance. Every time he smelled it, it seemed as if a pair of hands were about to reach out from his throat and then grab the delicious food into his stomach. Zhang Yi stared at Luo Dan. This was the first time he saw Luo Dan cooking. As expected, he used his supernatural power. When he was cooking, a strange red light entered the pot as he stirred the spoon. This is why the food he made was delicious. This method should add some characteristics to the food, but it will not be poisonous. Otherwise, the top leaders of the Snowy Plateau would not have allowed him to be the person in charge of cooking. Zhang Yi frowned and suddenly became interested in Luodan's ability. He lowered his head and whispered in Paji Gasang's ear, "Master Paji, can you give me a bowl of soup later?" Paji Gasang looked back at Zhang Yi and then laughed. "Mr. Jia, you can't bear the temptation. To be honest, I was a little resistant to it at the beginning. But as long as you taste the first bite," his eyes burst into greedy eyes, "you can never stop." Zhang Yi smiled and said nothing. He wanted the broth just to study what was so special about this thing that it could have such a huge magic. However, Paji Gasang said, "We noble people will not eat such low-quality food. We enjoy the best quality ingredients. If you like it, I will have someone arrange it for you later." Zhang Yi waved his hands repeatedly. "No, that's it." Seeing this, Paji Gasang did not say much and immediately asked someone to get a bowl of soup. At this time, the fragrance spread in all directions with the wind. After smelling it, the believers kneeling on the ground all had their eyes straightened. They stretched their necks forward in disbelief and saw the huge pot from which the fragrance spread. "What is this smell? It smells so good. I have never smelled such a good smell in my life. Is that the smell of the demons?" It turns out that the smell of the demons is so good. Gurgle. I seem to be hungry. Dear viewers, this video ends here. Please like and comment on the video for better reach. Thanks once again. Really appreciated.